All right, let's talk about the SteelPinion project. So I've been doing introductions to this project for a little while, and so I should just record this because it's basically the same thing every time. So steelpinion.com is the current website, and it probably will be the final website as well. Ultimately, we plan to deploy the game here. So if you check it out, eventually these are going to be exposed links here. So right now I just have the blog, and I'm working on the mods right now, and eventually we'll expose a client here. So SteelPinion isn't built the same way that most games are built. It's built as a headless game. So what that means is that you play it without any graphics whatsoever. Let me see if I can pull up a little test here. So it should bring up a bunch of failing tests, and you can kind of see some game action going on. So we built it in such a way that it would be pretty easy to extend and easy to mod. And so we tried to remove as many assumptions as possible, even something like graphics. So we're still going to build a graphical interface for it. We're going to build a couple of them, but it started with producing this API really and engine, like this game engine you can interact with and talk to and make things happen and get physics events and all that stuff going on that you have in a regular game engine, except it's not coupled to rendering. So we have a separation of concerns here, and it allows for some better engineering practices around things like multiplayer and eventually mods, right? Which is currently what we're dealing with. So before we got to this point, though, um, the game looked something like this. This is a little GIF animation, and you can see all these little squares here. They represent the ships, and there's like little numbers. It's kind of hard to read here because of the just the graphical quality of this recording isn't great, but it's running through a scenario, and there's some clouds. That's what the white is, and you can't really tell what direction things are facing, but it's spitting out in the logs here all the kind of maneuvers and what's happening, who's getting shot at, and what weapons they're using. And so you can see that there's like something happening here, but it just looks terrible. And coming in as programmers first, that's what best we could do at the time. So some time passed, and you're like, okay, we got to figure this out. And so I started doing like these little news updates, but I didn't do them very frequently. So this was the first one. And at the time we had a few people on the team, different specialties, and we were working on different things. And so we had certain goals that we wanted to accomplish, and just defining what it is that we're doing. And we had a timeline, which did not work. And then we got a little bit better. Like, okay, let's do 3D. Let's get some cool graphics in here. We're still going to have this. It's still a 2D game from a data perspective. There's only a couple dimensions that things move on, but at least graphically, like we can get some neat camera effects and that you would kind of expect from an RTS game. Those kind of controls. So we got that stuff set up, and trying to figure out how to organize ourselves better. There was a whole lot of ideas floating around, and it was difficult to manage like the discussions in Discord. So we split these ideas out into codecs, which we still use today. Well, and then there's more to say about organization, but I'll just leave it at that for now. We'll come to it in a little bit. And so then time passed, and we got a little bit better, and so we started to um, really like come up with a sort of personality for the group, as a whole, and how we intend to do things, what Still Opinions about, and then just really kind of stepping up the graphical side and getting this concept art and then learning how to like model. So there was a lot of learning that was going on this year, and I started just getting these ideas out of my head and started really applying them to the game, and wanted the interface to be somewhat like a tabletop, but also familiar like an RTS game. So that's where it started ended up. And for some of the UI elements, it became clear that we needed UI elements to represent some of the objects and actions in the game. So I mean, what's more fun than cards, with tabletop? And so we were able to do that with the 3D cards and kind of have fun with that, like put models inside them and do all sorts of fancy things like animate them. And, you know, we're slowly improving this, right? So there's like a loading screen that's interactable that also has a function. So like while you're waiting, you can position your units, and because it's a turn-based game, so this is the only like real-time, perhaps real-time feeling experience where you can move things and it'll respond. Because the rest of it's like turn-based, right? You select your maneuver, you select your attack, and the positioning is everything. So this plays like a strategy game, and a like an action RPG tactics game would. So like you're thinking of Divinity: Original Sin. There's others as well that I'm blanking on, like XCOM and Fire Emblem. So you have a maneuver phase, and then you have like attack phase. Some of these games combine them as one turn for a unit. This one splits them out, and so they all do it simultaneously. So they all do a maneuver phase at once, and then they all do an attack phase at once. And so this creates an interesting difficulty with predicting other units' positions. And then also there's a bidirectional threat for attacking. So you can both be shot down and shoot somebody else down at the same time. And so it's just positioning becomes really, really important. Um, there's a lot of UI like helpers and stuff to assist with like selection of moves, and just giving information to the player about like what's going on the map and what the data means. And there's really only like 2 or 3 data points to be concerned with, like hull, attack power, speed, and armor. Like there's not really that much. And so yeah, that's been a thing that's been iterated on a bunch, and this is one of the earlier iterations of that. There's a whole UX thing that was designed, the experience for like how the player would deal with maneuvering, how the player would deal with combat, just some rough mocks as to like where the buttons are positioned on the screen, and like how you access these functionalities that exist in the game. And so there's fleet configuration as well. The game's primarily split into 2 things: battle and configuration, and it's really been trimmed down to just be those 2 things. So you go from building a fleet and customizing your ships and your squad, and then you go and then you battle. Like, and that's you pick a squad and then you go into battle, and that's effectively the entire game. So it's really hyper focused on the customization and setting up of all that. Now the shipyard stuff is like going to be like a main menu thing, and so I thought to make that like a customization thing, but that's probably going to get like scoped back. There's a whole lot of other stuff in here, like just the style of the icons, and the actual architecture for this. There is a quite a bit, an entire design doc that pours out more. And so typically what I do is I give access to the design doc, and let them know that, hey, this is a part of the design doc, and it's not absolutely everything, but it's most of the important stuff. And so the story for Steel Pinion was imagined up through comics. So like I wanted to do it through comics, and have somebody dedicated to this. But we started to realize that we also need a story. And so trying to like close that gap and figure out the perspectives and stuff, we have a lot of questions and stuff, and we know some things, like we have some inspiration, but we don't want to copy these, right? Like and especially when it comes to the insane violence, like it seems to be something that follows a genre around, and I don't think is necessary. I'd want it to be more accessible, and so there's just a lot of questions around the story and how we do this, and so we're trying to piece this together, and so that's currently where we are. But hopefully by the time people actually view this, it'll be a lot further. So we have a hero's journey arc that we've written out and got an outline set up on, but then it's pretty loose from there, right? There's some factions, there's some people, and we now have to fill out the story, and we have to get this thing fleshed out into something that's real. So there's the models and stuff that have to be created. There's a story. Um, with our current like project management stuff, we have this old category just stuffed everything into one location. And now I'm starting to divide them out into individual projects. So there's one specific for artisans and like producing models. And so we have a very clear set of things to do, and knock those out. And when they get knocked out, then we just kind of move on to the next one. And then I'm going to create something similar for each kind of department, if you will, as they're introduced. So currently, like really, the only thing we have established is like the modeling, because it's the biggest need, like in terms of time. It takes a lot of time to do this. So um, and we will organize these further inside of the Steel Pinion Discord. So we have threads for everything, and for each thread or unit of work, then we can just have free open conversations here and attach whatever we need. And as we finish them and as we work on them, um, update things so everyone's on the same page. So we typically talk at least once every other day, to keep the project alive and keep things going. And then for other like groups for different roles, right? So these are the artisans that do models, but for say the writers, for example, they would like live in this space, and we would talk about the different subjects. And so that's kind of the general setup of the project and how to like collaborate with a group, and um, that will do.